3, 2, 1. Hello, this is I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any announcements? Not hearing any. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
A motion.
Yeah. So moved.
So moved. Thank you, sir. And seconded.
Yeah.
Vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. The agenda is approved. Public forum. Anybody wishing to speak at this time? I'll run up. John, who do we have today beside our intrepid counselor?
Also online.
Hi, Melissa.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Awesome. It was a real tear jerker when we got your letter of resignation.
Oh,
Better now. Better. But 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Okay.
oh,
Too much information. Okay. Anything else? Let's move on to the consent calendar. Are there any items that any of you gentlemen would like to pull? A lot of Afton stuff this time, huh? There's at least 5. And I do want to add that permit 2024-19 had very nice photos as well. Yeah, what'd you think of that? Yeah, okay. All right. Well, not hearing anything, I would like to make a motion to approve our consent calendar. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is approved. Okay.
If I can thank you all, I'm Sven Reesum, and we're on the consent calendar, so thank you very much. We look forward to furthering native planting.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I may not stay long, but
Yeah.
That's okay, Frank.
the burgers are on the grill.
Is that right?
Unfortunately, not.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not too far away then.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, wait a minute. We do know where you live.
Yes, you do.
Okay, very good, sir. All right, then. So just one quick question. There was no treasurer's report this time. We just have it the first
It'll be
week.
next, yeah,
Okay.
it'll be next month and this check.
Just checking, just checking. Used to it, okay. Update request from partners, volunteers, citizens advisory committee. Not hearing anything at this time. Going to move on to business and reports. Administrator engineer. 2024-15 on the variance request. Mr. Engineer.
Mr. President, managers, premier packet is the same permit review memo that you saw 2 weeks ago. Since that time, I've communicated with the contractor and we had an on-site meeting with the contractor, the landowner, Inspector Brower, and Melissa Thompson with Washington Conservation District. And we talked about the Valley Branch Watershed District buffer rule and fill within the 100-year floodplain rule. And they've made some modifications to the site. There's still a row of boulders along the entire shoreline that
Okay.
is acceptable according to the DNR. I met Stan Collin from the DNR was also present at this meeting. So the row of boulders is acceptable to the DNR.
I'm sorry, sir. I don't mean to interrupt you. Gentleman from the DNR is present electronically?
No, he was at the on-site meeting.
Oh, is it the on-site meeting? Forgive me. Okay, okay.
Sorry.
My fault.
So they've, we talked a lot about native vegetation and the purpose of vegetation, need for vegetation. They've shortened the lower retaining wall to be 19 feet rather than the 23 feet that they had indicated in the drawing. And they're planning to remove some of the asphalt boat launch area that was there when they purchased the property. So we felt that with the removal of the impervious asphalt boat launch area and the commitment to have native vegetation in that area, which will filter runoff coming from Lake Elmo Avenue before it gets in the lake. Felt that those were good revisions to the plan.
Okay. All right. So My understanding is that the DNR has given their blessing to allow this to come.
You know, approve what has been done.
Very good, sir. Okay. You, sir?
So, this sounds very positive to me, but we're still giving them a variance, is that right?
Would still require a variance because the Valley Branch rules are not clear on what is, if a boulder is considered impervious surface or not. Because they're putting up a boulder wall or one row of boulders along the entire shoreline, you could consider that as impervious surface within the buffer. And Valley Branch says that you cannot have any impervious in the buffer, and the buffer would need to be, in this case, 40 feet wide.
These are sandstone or limestone boulders.
You're ran under river rock type boulders
Oh, definitely.
like
impervious,
this, you know, placed to,
Yeah.
protect the shoreline. It's been used in other places along the lake.
Sure.
As far as rep goes, that stuff was pretty good quality, you know, I mean, it's pretty close to natural rock, and it provides interstitial spaces for biological things to go on.
It does have that. Okay.
Just,
Sir, go
just
ahead.
a clarification on the sketch, so I understand what you're saying. Those upper walls are what they've reduced to 19 feet? They say 28 feet on mine, 28 foot wide. And they've reduced that to 19 feet then? Is that-
Actually, the upper one is outside of the buffer.
Okay.
Above the 100-foot elevation, so that really doesn't matter to us, but this lower one. Yes, this does say 28 feet, but it's 19 feet according to the contractor.
Okay, all right. And so our variance that would be needed is to make the determination that the boulders are not impervious surface, or if we call it impervious, we need variance. But everything else would be good.
So that there's two things, Manager Brock. So the boulders along the entire shoreline is one issue, and then the lower boulder retaining wall is now 19 feet, but then they also have a 10-foot boat launch area that's asphalt right to the middle of this page, to the bottom of this page.
Okay.
And they're planning to remove the lower portion of that that's closest to the lake, but there would still be probably about 10 feet of section that would be within the Valley Branch required width of 35 feet. So
Okay.
if you count the boulders for the lower retaining wall of 19 feet plus the impervious surface of the boat launch, it would be above the 20 feet maximum.
Okay. If I may, I have, did you have something, sir?
No,
Okay, just listen. Okay. This is for our counselor. Have you had a chance to, take a look at this?
I have.
So what's your take? Are there any concerns that you?
Well, I guess here's my question, mostly for Engineer Hansen. Is there a design that they could use to achieve their goals that would also meet the Valley Branch rules? It's from the original memo seemed like it kind of said, well, this is how they want to do it, and they don't want to take another option. And I think that's very different from there is no other option. This is the way to accomplish it, and thus a variance is needed.
President Rashan?
Yes, sir.
I guess my opinion, they could revise the project so that it could conform to the Valley Branch rules, remove the boulders along the water's edge, and either shorten up the lower retaining wall or remove more of that asphalt boat launch area.
Okay.
Inspector Brower has a.
I guess my comment would be in the area between the two boulder walls or the retaining wall, where they're having a level area for picnic. That's all gonna be grass. It's not gonna be paved. I think what they're proposing is an improvement of what was pre-existing.
Right.
That would be my take. It's an improvement of what was already existing, and by removing some of that asphalt, boat launch, they're creating more, pervious surface. So personally, I think that it's an improvement and, it should be acceptable.
I agree it is an improvement by shortening up the boat launch. Runoff from the road, as I said, will have more buffer before it gets into the lake. And then the vegetation quality that they're proposing to put in is an improvement over what it was. For pollinators and soil stability.
And if I may add, since this is a variance, and we treat these things on a case-by-case basis, there's a chance that if something like this comes up again, somebody can't just feel comfortable to say, well, they did it, we can make something larger or whatever. In other words, the fact that they're removing the some of that bituminous, that's what that is, right? And they're cleaning it up, and I trust Inspector Jeff's opinion on this. And it seems to me that this is okay. And also, there would be my understanding, quite a cost to replacing what they intended on using with something different that would comply. Is that correct, or is that a non-issue?
It would be a cost because they've already placed the boulders along. the shore,
Ouch, yeah.
Which I believe at least part of the shoreline had been treated timbers.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
For the full length. For the full length.
I'm not sure how, if the treated timbers were the full length or just a portion.
I'm kind of looking at this as kind of a loosey-goosey mitigation project almost, really, by taking out that asphalt. And the one thing that appeals to me is if that asphalt was a runoff from Lake Elmo Avenue to be connected to where, i.e. impervious surface only direct to Lake Elmo. If we, by disconnecting that's a pretty substantial improvement.
Yes.
I think. So
Reduces waste and the influx of toxic substances and blah, blah, blah. Yes, sir.
But I think it's clear that what they propose to do is an improvement from what's there as far as natural features and, ecological form and function and all that. We're granting a variance for reasons that aren't consistent with why we should grant a variance, as our attorney has pointed out to us. So I think it's probably important to safeguard against precedent that we make the record of this meeting clear that we're granting this variance because they're making significant improvements to the property with the project. And removing prior bad things such as this asphalt that goes right down to the lake.
Right. So,
Are there, sorry,
yes, sir.
are there other improvements beyond the number of boulders or using boulders that they could make to even make it more palatable to us that you can think of, John?
And Joseph,
At the current phase of the project, I think they're, in between all the two boulder retaining walls, they're planning to use native vegetation. They're planning to also use native vegetation above the upper retaining wall to provide maybe more screening even against Lake Elmo Avenue. A future phase that they talked about is they do have a little picnic area and riprap below that picnic area, and they could in the future make some improvements there.
It's a treated wood kind of deck that was placed there, who knows how long ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Right.
That they're using, and once they start using the improved area, they may decide just to remove that. So, they don't know yet what they're gonna do with that. That's up on top though. That's probably out of our jurisdiction. But if it was vegetation, it would be an improvement.
So it seems all right with me. I think that this is beneficial to us, but clearly, our counselor's hitting on all cylinders. And she brought up some serious points. And that's what I always want to address because I don't want things to come back and haunt us, so to speak.
Yeah, and you're right in that because I mean the rules are clear that the hardship that results cannot just be a financial hardship. So I know it feels harsh in that sense because we know how much this all can cost, but that is the rule. So in thinking about granting a variance, I think all the findings that you've made and that the benefits of this particular proposal and this particular variance outweigh the necessity to meet the rules. I think you're fine in making those kind of detailed record, like Manager Pereira said. But I do just want to remind the managers of the variance standard so that you know what applies, and especially going forward as well.
Every single time. Every single time. Okay.
Is there an issue that they started to put in the boulders before the variance was actually granted?
There's a little bit of communication issue because the contractor heard that the DNR would allow the boulders along the shoreline. And he contacted me about the upper retaining wall, and they said, well, technically that probably doesn't need a permit from the Algonquin Watershed District because it's above 100 flood elevation. And he interpreted me as giving permission for because the DNR said it was okay to do the boulders against the shoreline. So I don't recall telling him that Valley Branch would be okay with that, but he went ahead and did that last weekend.
Yeah, it was over the weekend.
Yes, sir.
Have we had experience with this contractor before?
I think he's done some other work along the shoreline.
He was the contractor who did the work without a permit on Lake Elmo Avenue where the managers required the double permit. So he has been talking to me for like 6 weeks at least about this specific project, but yet he did some work without a permit.
Mr. Chair, can I suggest that we communicate to this contractor that we expect him to communicate better with us in the future and not do things
Without a doubt.
Because if this sounds like this might be the second time that he's gone ahead without.
The first time he claimed that the city of Lake Elmo told him he could go ahead and didn't tell him that he might have to get a Valley Branch Watershed District permit. And so Inspector Brower was driving by and noticed brand-new retaining walls against the lake. And so he was quick in responding to Inspector Brower and me and trying to correct the situation, but it was after fact.
So reminding him, do we do that in writing or can we just speak to him? You know, how can we go about that? So I understand.
Whatever the managers prefer.
Oh, really? Okay, well, we can do both. So somebody would like to send him a friendly reminder about our rules and our procedures.
And it could very well be that,
And the permit needs to be in place. Thank you, Rick. Right.
but also that, you know, he might, if he gets an opinion from the city, that doesn't mean he shouldn't still come and check in with us either.
Right.
So.
And I would say the same thing. I'm sorry. I would say the same thing with the DNR. Once he heard that it would be okay with them, he really shouldn't assume that then it meets the district's rules.
You gotta be careful with them, right?
I agree. I would, one comment is talking to the homeowner, when you stood on their shoreline, and this lot going down is fairly steep and narrow. So there are challenges of some of these places along there, like, well, how do we meet the buffers? Because you know, you've got to do some kind of retaining wall, otherwise how do you hold the hill? But when you stand on the shoreline and look to the right and the left, especially when you look to the right, you see all kinds of boulder walls all the way down. Some of them are pre-existing, some of them just showed up. So when the homeowners stand there saying, well, look, that doesn't mean it's okay. But we
Right.
see lots of other work that's taken place along the shoreline. And so maybe there's a discussion or reminder of the city of Lake Elmo that, by the way, any retaining wall work along the lake, and maybe
Well-
just as a reminder to the city that please get us involved, even if it doesn't apply, at least we know about it and we can say it's okay, it doesn't require a permit. Because some of the work is out of the floodplain that was done because of the grade of the property on the west end of the lake is a gentle slope going back.
Right.
These are like, steep, narrow, short
Sure.
areas along the east side.
The current staff at Lake Elmo are good about
Yeah.
communicating.
And just to, he did make this comment about the landowner about, heavy boat activity.
Yeah.
The fact is that boating activity has increased dramatically in the state over the past 10+ years. And now we have this wretched wake boats as well, that really throw up a lot of weight. And Elmo is a long, narrow lake, so I think it probably is susceptible to shoreline
It
erosion.
is.
Today at a level that we hadn't seen 10, 20 years ago, so.
Right.
Especially wanted to scoop the boulders in, and see what's losing the shoreline with the wake boats.
Are we seeing 300 horsepower stuff in Silver Lake? Something like that, young. I thought okay, 200. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of engine. Don, are you guilty of such thing?
I just widened Rainy River the past few days myself.
I believe that. Yes, sir.
I'll take a stab at a motion.
Please.
If you're ready.
Yes, we are.
I'll make a motion that says, in consideration of voluntary environmental enhancements.
I think first you have to remove it.
Oh, okay. So let's remove this
Oh, yeah, that's
permit
right.
from the table.
Second.
Oh, yeah, it's been moved and seconded.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it is removed. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for keeping us
Go right
clean,
ahead.
John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start over. But I thought if we could work this into the motion, but in consideration of voluntary and environmental enhancements on the site.
Mm.
I make a motion to approve the permit with the variance required for the boulder wall construction.
We'll second that
I
motion.
would ask
Oh, sorry.
improved environmental, just to,
Sure.
Okay, yeah, that's better.
The voluntary enhancements or improvements to the
Yes.
environmental conditions on the site.
I will second that motion.
I
Okay.
would, if I may also add for clarity that the plan that is approved is the one that is the updated plan that engineer Hansen discussed.
That
Okay.
too.
Yes. Is that okay, John? Easy enough? All right, thank you.
Well, Attorney Kirchner, that's the motion to approve the variance, and then there'd have to be a motion to approve the permit as well.
Oh, okay, all
Okay.
right. So this was for the variance that, all right, so let's.
Okay. We're ready for a vote.
I,
All right,
Aye.
I
The variance is approved. Now,
make a motion to approve permit number 2024-15.
second,
it's been moved and seconded.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, sir.
I just want to thank the board for processing this at a detailed level, because I think it was worthy of that. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for John and Jeff for meeting with the, out on site.
I am just gushing.
Getting it clear.
You'll be back.
Hi, Greg.
Yeah, I'll be stopping.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our 2023 annual water quality report. Okay. John, please lead us.
Program managers Kevin Macon is here tonight from Bar Engineering. Evan's an environmental scientist. He's been reviewing water quality data of Branch Watershed District for several years and preparing annual report that you see. He's here tonight to give a brief summary of the data, mostly focusing on the data. And then toward the end of this presentation, he has a summary of some of the suggested actions that the managers might want to take that were included in the memo.
Right. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Yeah, I'll be discussing the parameters that were monitored in 2023. Also discuss the Minnesota water quality standards that apply to the Branch Watershed District water bodies. When talking about the 2023 results, I'll give an overall summary of results. I'll talk in more detail about a few specific lake basins and also talk about the creeks. And if that said, I'll also cover some of our suggested additional activities for 2024. Parameters that were monitored in 2023 for the lake basins included secondary transparency, which is a measure of water clarity. Also chlorophyll A, which is a pigment used to measure algae abundance. And total phosphorus, which is the limiting nutrient of algae in most Minnesota lakes. And chloride was also measured in a number of the basins, but not all basins. For streams, water quality parameters included total phosphorus, ammonia, nitrates, chloride, bacteria, or E. coli, total suspended solids, several metals, temperature, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, pH, and flow. This slide summarizes the water quality standards that were applied to the lake basins. Valley Branch Watershed District is within the north central hardwood forest ecoregion, and there are separate standards for deep lakes and shallow lakes in that region for the eutrophication parameters. So the eutrophication or nutrient parameters include total phosphorus, chlorophyll A, and secondary transparency. There's no nutrient parameter or nutrient standard for wetlands. And also included on the right there is chloride standard, which is the same for deep shallow lakes as well as wetlands. Water quality standards for streams are summarized in this slide. And Valley Creek is a cold water stream within the South River nutrient boundary, while Kells Creek is a warm water stream. So some of these standards are different for cold water and warm water stream. On the left there, we have a bacteria or E. coli standard, which is the same for cold water and warm water stream. Phosphorus and chlorophyll A standards are the same for cold and warm water. Temperature standards are different. For cold water stream, the standard said no material increase in temperature, but for Valley Creek, we're also interested in protecting trout, and trout prefer water temperatures in the range of 51 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and temperatures above 75 degrees Fahrenheit can be lethal for trout. Dissolved oxygen needs to be above 7 milligrams per liter in cold water and above 5 milligrams per liter in warm water. Total suspended solids in cold water, the standard is 10 milligrams per liter, and for warm water, 65 milligrams.
Question is, TCA sets these standards?
Yes, the rulemaking, I guess the MPCA would propose standards, but then there's a state rulemaking process to approve them. I forget all the details of that process, but yeah, usually MPCA is involved in proposing the rules, and then there's, I guess, a legislative measure to approve the standard.
Do you have any opinion on the chloride standard I mean, I noticed it's the same all the way through. And, you know, it's a fairly new standard. It's, you know, is there some variability that's being considered in the future? You know, just to give, you know, I guess from my perspective, it's like knowing which areas we want to concentrate on in terms of where chloride is more of an issue and where it might be less of an issue.
My understanding of the chloride standard, you know, is based on some toxicity studies, because unlike nutrients, which, you know, can create algae blooms, which might, you know, impede, you know, recreational value, you know, chloride is you know, directly determined from toxicity tests. And I'm not familiar with that information that the state UPCA used to develop the chloride standard. So look into that more. But, you know, like based on toxicity tests, I guess, you know, chloride is toxic to the organisms that were tested at this level. So I guess that's how I explain that, you know, it's the same chloride standard for all water bodies, lakes and streams, based on toxicity.
Thank you.
This slide just summarizes the Valley Branch Watershed District monitoring schedule for lake and wetland basins. Just point out that most high and medium priority water basins are monitored every year. The low priority basins have been monitored every 3 years recently on a rotating cycle. So about 1/3 are monitored 1 year, and second, third another year, and then the remaining third on the third year cycle of the cycle. Some low priority basins are monitored every year if they're upstream or adjacent to a higher priority water body. For example, Goose Lake North is a low priority water body, but due to the Goose Lake South being a high priority water body, we've been monitoring it every year. This slide includes the figure from the annual report that shows the basins that were monitored in 2023. And then there's just a color coding of the priority, you know, high priority, medium priority, low priority have a different color coding. The figure here shows the 2023 summer averages of total phosphorus for all the lake basins. On the left, you have the 3 deep lakes that were monitored in 2023. Left of center, you have the shallow lakes, and on the right, you have the wetland basins. So the orange lines are the standards. Again, there's separate standards for deep lake and shallow lakes. So results or values that are above the orange line are worse than the standard, and values that are below the lines are better than the standard. And on the right, you know, there is no standard for the wetland basins to the right. So all 3 deep lakes that were monitored in 2023 had water quality better, had total phosphorus better than the standard, while 6 of the 10 shallow lakes had total phosphorus better than the standard. And just point out that Capal's Pond West and Kramer Pond there on the far right, the wetland basins, the summer averages, or they're ordered from left to right, increase in concentration. So on the far right there, you have Capal's Pond West and Kramer Pond. And just want to point out that they notably higher phosphorus than the other basins monitored. This slide shows the results of 2023 monitoring of second transparency. Again, values above the orange line are worse than the standard, and values below are better than the standard. All 3 of the deep lakes had water quality better than the deep lake standard for second transparency, and 7 of the 10 shallow lakes had summer average second transparency better than the standard. And third, here we have the summer averages of chlorophyll A for the basins monitored in 2023. The deep lakes had water quality better than the standard, and 7 of the 10 shallow lakes had chlorophyll A better than the standard. Again, just point out on the far right there, the highest concentrations of chlorophyll A were for Kramer Pond and Falls Pond West, similar to the total phosphorus.
Minor interruption, sir. But John, help us, me, Capal's Pond, its location.
Falls Pond is adjacent to the Gateway Trail north of 694. So it's the edge of Pine Springs, Mononegee,
Okay.
and Grant.
Is
So
it,
north of Highway 36. So
is it close to the road by chance?
it's actually close to the Gateway Trail. It's not necessarily super close to 694.
Okay. Yeah,
Falls Pond up here.
okay. Thank you.
Just to the north side of 36.
Yes, 36.
Yeah. We had some, because we had some backup a few years back where some of the outlets pipes were plugged or something and it was backing up into those ponds, I remember.
There's a new home that was being constructed and they built a driveway through some of these wetlands. And so we're working with them to make sure that the construction was not causing problems.
Well, it seems like there's one house with a long driveway with a, going through the wetland already.
Thank you.
We examined the trends and summer averages of water quality for the eutrophication parameters, the most recent 10-year period. Lake de Montreville and Lake Edith had statistically significant trends of degrading water quality for the most recent 10-year period, but water quality remained good in both basins in 2023. Downs Lake, Lake Olson, Silver Lake, and Sunfish Lake showed statistically significant trends of improving water quality and waterborne parameters. Now I'll talk in more detail for a few of the lake basins. On the right, we have figures showing the summer averages of Secudis transparency on the top for all years. Chlorophyll A summer averages in the center chart, and total phosphorus on the bottom. And the red line is the standard for each respective parameter. So values above that red line are worse than the standard, and values below are better than the standard. With Lake de Montreville, there's a degrading trend in summer averages of phosphorus for the most recent 10-year period. And on the right, on the bottom right, there is total phosphorus. The 2023 summer average of phosphorus was 18 micrograms per liter, which is less than half the Deep Lake standard of 40 micrograms per liter, and was better than the previous 3 years. The 2023 summer averages chlorophyll A and Secudis transparency were some of the best on record for the lake. And then just wanted to note that the 2022 summer average of chlorophyll A was slightly worse than the Deep Lake standard, which is the only year since 2010 that any parameter has been worse than the respective standard for Lake de Montreville. Next, we have Lake Edith. Lake Edith had a degrading trend in summer averages of phosphorus as well for the most recent 10-year period. But the 2023 summer average of phosphorus was 17 micrograms per liter, less than half the Deep Lake standard of 40 micrograms per liter. The most recent 10-year period starts at a period of exceptionally good water quality for Lake Edith. Just want to point out that 2014 and 2015 had the lowest summer averages of phosphorus on record for Lake Edith, 11 and 9 micrograms per liter respectively. So yeah, so for the trend of degrading water quality, that 10-year period is starting some years of exceptionally good water quality. Next we have Silver Lake. Silver Lake is a shallow lake and is currently listed as impaired for nutrients. The water quality has been improving in Silver Lake after having worsened following whole lake herbicide treatments that occurred in 2007 and 2008. There's a statistically significant trend of improving secondary dish transparency for the most recent 10-year period. For the past 10 years, had summer averages of phosphorus better than the shallow lake standards. But more years of good water quality, especially for phosphorus, are needed to remove the lake from the impaired waters list for nutrients. Next, we have,
So you said following the treatment, it got worse. Is that to be expected following the treatment for a couple of years?
the herbicide treatments, where there are some exceptions to those weren't typical. As I recall, they were too late in the year or when water temperatures were warm. You know, there's methods that are typically used to avoid impacting the entire plant community. You know, like you're trying to target Eurasian water milfoil or curly pondweed, whether you're selective on the herbicide or curly pondweed grows earlier in the year. So if you apply the herbicide before the other plants are growing, you can minimize the impact to other plants. And my understanding is some errors were made in those treatments.
Whole lake herbicide treatments are led by the Silver Lake Improvement Association. The applicator, as I recall, did the application of the water temperatures at about 60 degrees, which is our recommendation, because then we can start impacting them as well. So after those applications, that really affected the vegetation in the lake and saw the changes in the temperatures.
Next, we have Sunfish Lake. Sunfish Lake, also a shallow lake, and is also currently listed as impaired for nutrients. There's a statistically significant trend of improving secondary dish transparency and chlorophyll A for the most recent 10-year period. For the past 11 years, there has been summer averages of total phosphorus better than the shallow lake standard. And 5 consecutive years now of secondary dish transparency and chlorophyll A better than the standards. And 2017 also had chlorophyll A better than the standard. So the NPCA might consider Sunfish Lake for removal from the impaired waters list for nutrients soon. And I just wanted to point out that Sunfish Lake water quality improved dramatically following an increase in lake level volume during years of wet or greater precipitation. So basically the lake volume, the depth and lake volume increased and diluted the phosphorus that was coming from sediment, internal loading of phosphorus. And so that increase in volume essentially diluted the phosphorus in the lake.
You think, I noticed that it seemed like most of the graphs that you've shown have improved fairly dramatically for the past 10, 20 years.
Yes, yeah, sunfish especially in this graphs.
Yeah, we think a lot of that, as it says, for sunfish, the water levels came up with the additional rainfall had an impact. I think that's what's really leading this trend, or there are other things that are also that humans are doing to improve the situation.
John, I don't know if you could comment on the watershed. I guess offhand, I don't know what
I
has
think it
happened.
depends on the water body. Because some water bodies, just the conversion from row crop to single family residential, once that single family residential gets established with vegetation and stormwater management practices are in place, that could lead to an improvement in the runoff quality feeding to the lakes. The Watershed District has implemented practices around some of these lakes at Silver Lake. And maybe those practices are hopefully those practices are helping with improvement. Some of it's climate data where some lakes, because it's been, some lakes respond better to weather conditions. Some lakes might respond better to drier conditions, but I'm just guessing that it's dependent maybe on each water body, and there might not be a overall reason why.
And Sunfish Lake is experiencing construction around. And it seems like it's getting established on the eastern side. I believe it's higher elevation. That has been controlled, so there's no,
Although Sunfish Lake, most of all the development that you see on the
Yeah.
east side doesn't drain to Sunfish Lake. It
Yeah.
drains to Downs Lake.
exactly. Which is something else.
And Sunfish Lake level is down again.
Yes.
Of course, we've gone through what, our third year in a row of drought conditions.
Yep.
It was extremely high for many years, as we all know. And now it's down quite a bit. That using that gauge at that little peninsula and island out there, that's usually underwater. It's as much as I've seen of it in the last number of years. I don't think I've ever seen it standing out for I don't know how long ago, 15 years ago or something.
But
So it's
the case as Kevin was saying with Sunfish Lake, kind of a solution to pollution is dilution. Because of
Well, and the reason I ask is, if we're doing something right, let's identify that and more
Yeah.
of it, or, be able to focus on that. So to me, that would be a useful thing to know.
Thank you, sir.
That's speak a little bit about chloride, and just wanted to include a slide here to talk about the environmental impacts of chloride before I get into the data. Kind of concentrations, chloride can be toxic to fish, aquatic bugs, and amphibians. Terrestrial and aquatic vegetation can be negatively impacted by chloride as well. Soil can lose its ability to retain water and store nutrients and be more prone to erosion. Salt use for road de-icing is the biggest source of chloride in most Minnesota lakes and streams. Chloride concentrations can be correlated with development density or percent impervious surfaces. And water softener, salt use, and agricultural use of potash, which is potassium chloride, are other possible sources of chloride depending on the watershed. Chloride does not break down or settle into the sediment like phosphorus might settle to the sediment. So concentrations are only reduced by dilution or flushing out of the lake by lower concentration water. And then just the final point here, 1 teaspoon of salt can permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. This figure shows the 2023 chloride monitoring results for the basins that had chloride measured in 2023. The red line at the top of the chart is the chronic standard of 230 milligrams per liter. And we have three dates that were measured where chloride was measured in the basins in 2023. So we have May, July, and September chloride measurements. Chloride was measured by lakes that were monitored. Chloride was measured in the lakes monitored by Washington Conservation District as well as Ramsey County in 2023, but the camp volunteers did not measure chloride. Some lakes did not have chloride measured. No measurements exceeded the chronic standard for chloride of 230 milligrams per liter. Weber Pond came closest to the standard with a concentration of 229 milligrams per liter, so just 1 milligram per liter below that standard. Lake Demontreville, Eagle Point, Echo Lake, Silver Lake, and Weber Pond all had 1 or more chloride result greater than 150 milligrams. And just wanted to show on a map here where some of these lakes with the higher chloride results are located within the watershed district. So the 4 lakes in the far northwest corner of Valley Branch Watershed District are Echo Lake, Weber Pond, Silver Lake, and Lake de Montrevel. And this area has higher density of impervious surfaces and several highways. And then Eagle Point Lake, the fifth lake that had higher chloride, which is further south there on the bottom of this figure, is also downstream of areas with higher densities of impervious surface as well as highways. I'll switch over to talking about water quality results in the streams, starting with chloride in Valley Creek. So the figure here shows all chloride results at the main stem monitoring station from 2001 through 2023. Valley Creek chloride concentration is generally below 40 milligrams per liter, which is well below the chronic standard of 230. Concentrations of chloride generally have increased from 2001 through 2020, but have been more stable over the past 3 years. Results of bacteria monitoring in Valley Creek are shown on the bottom left figure, and the 10-year aggregated geometric mean values are shown on the bottom right. Valley Creek is currently listed as impaired for bacteria, as shown on the chart in the bottom left. Several of the results in 2023 had E. coli counts worse than the standard of 126 colony forming units, or CFU, per 100 milliliters during the warmer summer months. And then just point out on the chart in the bottom left, the dashed red line closer to the bottom is the monthly geometric mean standard, and the orange dashed line near the top is the maximum individual standard. And we also are showing the results of samples collected in the North Branch and South Branch of Valley Creek, as well as the main stem WAP monitoring stations. The 10-year aggregated geometric means were worse than the standard for the months of June and July, as shown on the bottom right. This figure shows the geometric mean for the summer months of June through September for all years monitored from 2006 through 2023. There's no apparent trends in the summer geometric mean results. Also wanted to note that in 2022, 4 samples were collected in Valley Creek and were tested for source identification. And those tests confirm that human E. coli bacteria is present in Valley Creek. This slide presents the bacteria results for Kells Creek. On the bottom left, the individual results for the 2023 monitoring season, and the right are the 10-year aggregated geometric means for the summer months. Kells Creek is also currently on the impaired waters list for bacteria. On the bottom left there, showing the individual results. Most of the results for 2023 were worse than the standard, with the exception of the May standard, or the May result was better than the standard. For the 10-year aggregated geometric mean, the months of June, July, August, and September were all worse than the standard. The slide shows the June through September geometric mean for all years monitored, 2007 through 2023. There's no statistically significant trend in these results for the most recent 10-year period, but years 2016 through 2024 have generally been better than previous years, 2007 through 2000. Valley Creek total suspended solids results are discussed on this slide. The figure shows the percent of TSS samples that are worse than the 10 milligram per liter standard for cold water streams. So the blue dots are all samples, grab samples and storm composite samples, while the orange squares are grab samples only. Just to help show that the stormwater samples, the composite samples are generally higher in TSS compared to the grab samples. Valley Creek could have TSS impairment added in the future as results are at times worse than the 10 milligram per liter standard. To determine if Valley Creek is impaired for TSS would require a fairly detailed determination of the time duration that TSS is greater than 10 milligrams. It's a bit more involved analysis to determine a TSS impairment. Kells Creek total suspended solids results for 2023 are shown in the table there on the right. Kells Creek is impaired for total suspended solids. Kells Creek has flashy flows, meaning that high flows, falling rain events leads to stream channel erosion and increased concentrations of suspended sediment. And you can see in the middle there on the table describes if they were grab samples or composite samples. And you can see the storm composite samples have much higher concentrations of TSS compared to the grab samples. So in the composite storm samples, concentrations range from 692 to 4,770, considerably higher than this 65 milligram per liter standard. Whereas the base flow samples were all below that standard, with results ranging from 11 to 37 milligrams per liter. Just touch on the 2024 monitoring recommendations. I won't go into detail on this slide. These are the recommendations for basins and streams that the managers have already approved for 2024. This slide details some of the additional suggested activities for 2024, which includes implementation of projects to improve stream water quality to address TSS. Some of these projects might include reductions in flashy flows to Kells Creek. And reducing peak flows can reduce that stream channel erosion that contributes to elevated TSS in Kells Creek. Could also include continuation of stream and ravine stabilization projects in Valley Creek and Kells Creek. Some additional suggested activities can include public outreach on water quality monitoring results. That could include annual newsletter reporting on the higher priority water bodies or a rotating cycle of the lower priority water bodies. And also include publishing or announcing water quality results in local newspapers with the assistance from Water Resources Education Specialist Angie Hong. Some additional activities could include targeted public education, such as education of septic system owners, especially in Afton. Targeted cost share program could be explored, possibly led by Afton and supported by Washington County and Bell Branch Watershed District. Shoreline homeowner education could be considered, educating the homeowners on shoreline fish and wildlife habitat. Lake Jane is listed as impaired for the fish bioassessment, and habitat loss has been identified as a factor there. Education or targeted public education could include chloride reduction strategies, especially regarding road salt application. Several of the basins with a higher chloride concentrations, Echo Lake, Weber Pond, Lake Demontreville, are located within or downstream of the city of Matamidi, and education outreach could be focused there. And that's all I have for today. Any questions?
Just have, one from early in the presentation, the phosphorus levels on Kramer Pond that were just kind of off the charts. Is that an internal loading, or do we know why phosphorus levels would be that high in Kramer Pond? I mean, I understand it's just a shallow kind of but it just seemed awful high in comparison to everything else.
Yeah, offhand, I'm not very knowledgeable on Kramer Pond. Offhand,
Kevin, do you want to scroll back to the map so that all the
Yes.
pictures know where Kramer Pond is?
Thank you.
yes, which helped me find Kramer.
So Kramer Pond, there, you might get confused because we call another lake up by Sunnybrook Lake Kramer Pond, but this is Kramer Pond down by Keats Avenue, just north of I-94. It's basically landlocked. There's maybe a little bit of runoff that comes from the Spolna site into that, and it's surrounded by eggland. There's been cattle that have access right up into the water.
Sure.
And it's a pretty shallow lake or pond. It's actually kind of multiple volts.
Okay,
So I'm guessing it is an internal volt.
thank you.
Yeah. Question on,
Surrounded by cattle too. There's two cattle out there.
when you look at the results of the chloride impacts on Weber Pond and Lake de Montreal in the northwest corridor, but Long Lake is not, which I kind of find curious that,
Long Lake wasn't sampled.
okay, this is like, well, they're connected, so why isn't there an impact to Long Lake? Was kind of confusing me, so.
Kevin mentioned the lakes that the Watershed District contracts with Washington Conservation District and with Ramsey County. Those had chloride samples collected and analyzed, but the lakes that are monitored by volunteers include Long Lake, and that's why I didn't get the sample. The monitoring plan that Kevin came up with, the managers approved at the last meeting, does include collecting chloride at Long Lake, as well as a lot of it's in the Tri-Lakes area, or a lot of the wetlands in the Tri-Lake areas, just to get a better understanding of migration possibly of the chloride from the upstream end of the watershed to the middle of the watershed.
About the chloride monitoring, I'm just curious if are the chloride samples taken at depth, or are they at the surface composite like the other?
At the surface. Although I will note, so the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services have agreed to monitor Lake Jane this year. And when they do monitoring, they'll do a little more intensive monitoring, and they will collect samples at the surface and at depth in Lake Jane. But the rest of the chloride monitoring we propose is at the surface only.
In deeper lakes, the concentrations would be at the lowest level, right? Like a, what's it called, halocline, something like that?
Yeah, typically, if the lake, especially, if the lake is stratified.
Right, like Jane, right?
Then, yeah, chloride concentrations can be higher near the bottom, at the lake bottom.
And if they're not disturbed, they might go unnoticed, so to speak.
McCarran's apparently forms 3 layers.
Okay.
There's a thermocline dividing the
Right.
warm surface, and then
Yep.
and then the deep, and then there's a 3rd layer in the very bottom that's saline.
Yep.
Which is rather disturbing.
Where the Titanic sits.
And yeah, having more dissolved salts, chloride or other salts in the water increases the density. So there is some concern for deeper lakes that that chloride and salt might increase the density and further reduce mixing of the lake. And then with reduced mixing, then you can have longer periods of low dissolved oxygen on the lake bottom and some other cascading results or issues.
I mean, for some lakes, the benthic zone is
Yep.
pretty important biologically, you know.
Yeah.
But something like a big saline layer down on top of all the fauna that live down the ooze of the lake is pretty troublesome as well.
So, because I noticed that Lake Jane had an aquatic biomass problem, so. And that was apparently associated with habitat loss, so what is that? That's essentially in the littoral zone, or what can you tell me about that if you have that information?
Yeah, so Lake Jane, I think the shoreline is largely developed, so a lot of homeowners around the perimeter of Lake Jane. And so the impairment is for the fish community. So the DNR did a fish survey and they have some indices of biological integrity, and so it scored low. And they determined that a significant contributing factor was loss of habitat. So that could include changes to vegetation. There might be less high quality vegetation within the water, but also things like tree fall. So, there's maybe fewer trees on shoreline, or if a tree does fall into the lake, it's removed more quickly as that dead tree fall, woody debris can be important habitat to fish as well.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
that kind of led the board last year to prepare those brochures and send out mailings to all property owners that abut shorelines, and that I guess is planned to do that on an annual basis to look for new owners of shorelines and some of those.
We're gonna send it out to the new owners.
Not every single owner.
No, I get it, yeah. Sure, that's totally beneficial. But maybe we need to step it up in the future, I don't know. Just saying at this point. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions for the gentleman? Comments? Anything?
Just a comment.
Second.
I forget the name of the lake now, the one that's north of 36 we're talking about. Yeah. And I'm wondering if some direct contact with the lakeshore owners there might be worthwhile in terms of maybe addressing some of the inflow there, or let them know that, having a decent sized buffer around your property and that type of thing, a little more concentrated when we've got such a high level, then, talking to people directly might be worthwhile in the sense. That's probably not that many homes.
Yeah, it's that the area used to be a farm. It's a series of wetlands that are generally landlocked. They've only ultimately overflowed to, I think it's Lake de Montreville once or twice in the last 3 decades. So it could be another internal load issue, not necessarily some current land activity. It's just the phosphorus is trapped.
Yeah.
But yes, reaching out to them.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you, sir. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. So John, just to make sure there's nothing that needs to go on beyond what we've already voted for to implement. We're okay there?
I think that's the highest priority, is to get the agreement with Washington Conservation District to do the monitoring, but the activities listed on the screen here, I think are definitely things for the managers to consider either this year or with your 2025 budget. Some of these things you
definitely
are doing, you are working on some stream civilization projects in Valley Creek. And We almost always talk to Angie Hong to do
Oh,
a
yeah.
newsletter or to do some sort of public outreach or information about the water quality results, and we'll post this to our website with the report. I have encouraged Washington County to organize a meeting with Afton and Valley Branch Watershed District to talk about septic systems, and that will likely happen in May. Just to have a discussion and find out, Valley Branch, PCA, EPA, we're all saying that there's a problem. These water bodies are impaired for E. coli, done some identification, found that the source is from humans, at least in Valley Creek, and so that is seems likely that it's because of the septic systems that are causing it, and so trying to figure out what could be done there, and if there's a more aggressive enforcement of existing rules, or if there's some sort of cost share program that should be implemented, who would be the best person or best thing?
Go ahead, sir.
I wonder if, does the Clean Water Council, do they have any history of funding, cost share funding for septic upgrades?
I'm not aware of any. There are programs that exist to do it, but they're like low interest loan programs, and a lot of them are based on your income. So a lot of the property owners in Afton probably don't qualify.
Snobby. Just have a question on it. Just kidding.
For those, is that fairly low in the watershed, where we take those samples? Or do we do sampling at different intervals on Valley Branch?
So on Creek,
There's
Kells
one Valley
Creek, it was kind of most downstream ends, and then there was upstream end about where it becomes a more perennial flowing creek, or more likely to do that.
Yeah.
And Valley Creek was trying to look back because Kevin mentioned that on the main stem, which would be at the downstream end, but I seem to recall that Washington Conservation District also sampled both branches, so the north branch and the south branch.
They were both high.
And they both had,
Okay.
both had human tracers.
Yeah, well, you know where I was going with it. I was just wondering if we could do some additional sampling to kind of focus in where this might be happening.
Who's leaking?
The mayor of Afton has pushed for that to like, to just sample as you go upstream on these, but
Yeah.
it's not, because there's a groundwater component, I think it'd be challenging to pinpoint which septic systems are.
Yes, sir.
Two questions. The flashiness and the suspended solids problem in Kells Creek, is that part of the E. coli issue as well? I mean, are they tied together?
The TSS.
I mean, does,
It could be, the bacteria could be in the sediment, bacteria
yeah,
can settle out in the sediment, or grow there too. And so resuspending that sediment, you're also likely resuspending bacteria that are there as well. So, but typically the E. coli, part of largely the nature of how you analyze for E. coli. We don't measure E. coli on the stormwater composite samples. So the E. coli would usually just grab samples at the time that Washington Conservation District staff are out there.
and the second question, so I think it was last year, we spent a fair amount of money on erosion control projects, I don't know, somewhere around 450,000. Were any of those in Kells Creek or around Kells Creek or in the Kells Creek watershed?
And there were, there was one on Kells Creek and one on Valley Creek.
And could we look at Kells Creek again? Are there additional highly erodible sites in Kells Creek that we might want to continue doing projects like that, maybe?
Yes, so we do inspection of Valley Creek and Hills Creek, and then we kind of prioritize and report to the managers which ones we think make the most sense or the highest priority. And I believe Josh is planning to come to your next meeting to give a little bit more background.
Bring that up.
Can I make another request, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
John mentioned that, maybe we could do something this year or next year. Could we maybe have a look? Maybe next meeting when Josh is here at what resources we have available this year to try to do something, if any?
So
So,
that was his goal, is to, in a report, he sent out, requests for bids on 2 projects. Some of the restoration work on, it's now Bellwin property. It was the Meisner property on Valley Creek, and then also downstream on the Viva's property that's there. And so by the next meeting, I'll have a cost of what those activities might cost, and then we can compare it to the budget for the managers that allocate to see,
Yes.
is there remaining funds to do more of this work under 2024 budget, or if the managers want to shift around some of those.
great.
Right, so we can revisit this at the next meeting. Exactly, excellent. Make a note, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Everybody's okay with this one? The 2025-2035 Watershed Management Plan. Greg.
Thank you, President Marchand. So what was included in the packet this month or this week was an example subwatershed section. Not fully complete yet, but enough to give you an idea of what would be included in there. Using the Eagle Point Lake subwatershed as an example.
Okay.
This was section 5.12 in the 2015 plan. If you recall, the 2015 plan had 38 subwatershed sections for each of the major subwatersheds within your district. Most of those sections were defined by being the watershed tributary to a major water resource like Lake Jane or Eagle Point Lake or Valley Creek. And this one was to Eagle Point Lake. In the 2015 plan, those sections were very comprehensive, included all of the historical data that's been collected, over almost 1,100 pages amongst those 38 subwatersheds. The Eagle Point Lake example here, I think, is about 40 pages. And I think it includes about 11 pages of concentrated text at the beginning and, between 25 and 30 pages of appendix material. That appendix material included time series of historical water quality data, all of the lake vegetation surveys that have been done before. I think there's phytoplankton data that's been collected. And I think there's also a copy of the, maybe the dam operating agreement. So very comprehensive. What our proposal is for the 2025 plan is to streamline that information in a more accessible format, and that's what was included in the packet. The packet includes a 6-page example of what a subwatershed section could look like. And there's a memo that introduces this in the packet that kind of compares what data is still in there versus what data is no longer in there. And the idea being that the general information within the within the section, things like where that subwatershed is located, some of the quick facts about the lake, like what's the 100-year flood level, what's its MPCA classification, is it a deep or shallow lake? What's your Valley Branch classification? Is it a high priority or low priority? That kind of data would still be included in a table. It's on page 2 of this example. And the list of planned activities over the course of the next 10 years, what you plan to do within this watershed. would still be included. But a lot of the historical data would be referenced to external documents. And Kevin just finished presenting the results of that highly detailed monitoring report. You guys prepare that every year as you do an annual report to Bowser that details what activities you've done over the past year, what the results of the monitoring are. And the idea is that the 2025 plan, rather than include all of those figures within the plan itself, because they're already included in that monitoring report, would include links to your annual reports on the website. So anybody who accesses this plan on your website, if they access it in 2032, they'll click that link and they'll go to the page that lists, the 2025 annual monitoring report, 2026, and so forth. So they can go back and look at all that data. So it's not going to be immediately out of date. There's also some figures where we have typically included, we had land use figures for each of these subwatersheds. Again, that would reference the web map. And so this section, what would remain in this section is really kind of talking about the high level trends. What are the factors that affect each of these water bodies in terms of their intended uses, what's going on in the watershed, whether the water quality has been impaired or has improved in the past. And again, highlight the activities that are planned for the next 10 years. The last page would include educational resources for folks who might live in the watershed or want to get involved. And that would be coordinated potentially with Washington Conservation District, sorry, the East Metro Watershed East. And
research is education.
Yeah.
Program.
And we've tried to style this in a way that would be a little bit more attractive to folks. And this blank sidebar here, the idea is that each watershed probably has at least one unique feature that could be featured in the sidebar, whether it's a past Valley Branch project or a particularly unique ecological feature of the surrounding area, something like that.
Right, here's what we did, excuse me, here's what we have, and by the way, we performed this project or, engaged in something.
Yep. I mean, Valley Creek, it makes sense that there might be a sidebar that talks about it being a trout stream and what are the different characteristics that go with being a trout stream and additional protection. And so basically the goal tonight was to show you what this would look like as for this particular example, but they'll all vary a little bit as they did in the last plan, and get your initial feedback on are there elements that we proposed to cut that you absolutely want to keep in here, or does this seem like an appropriate approach?
Sure.
Personally, I like it. These types of reports can easily become what's the term, data rich and information poor. And I really like having this brief summary and everything else somewhere else. I like that.
Me too.
I would agree. I think in the spirit of, trying to make something that fits with a web-based type of product and so on, you may want to put a few more hooks into it. And examples that I thought of would be on the ecological health page. Include a map there, not all of the maps, but one of the maps that either talks about, that is basically the latest edition for the lake for people. I'm thinking the audience might be, people that live nearby. And to have them be able to see, oh, this is what the condition is. And if I want to see more, there's a hook there to go to see the detailed study. Or it might be something that is an improvement or something unusual about, choosing something for the individual subwatershed that fit in that way. Might allow people to understand their subwatershed as well as have a way to get additional information if they're interested. And then, on the previous, let's see, on the water quality page, thank you for adding the stuff on chloride. I don't know if appropriate or not, in terms of kind of getting a little bit into analysis, but I think me, it would be something that I think if I think the audience is people that live in the watershed or the sub-watershed, they may be wondering what that means. You know, how important is it? Or, you know, it seems like, at least right now, what we know is it sounds like up in the northwestern part of the our watershed district, you know, there's some issues with surrounding property, or, you know, there's a lot more parking lot areas and places that are providing salt. Just having a short sentence about that might be useful. Excuse me, so people have some understanding of, you know, what's going on in my sub-watershed. You know, is it an issue, or is it not an issue? Is it something that's coming from somewhere else?
As a factor,
Huh? Yeah, and just something to come and analyze it a little bit, just very briefly.
it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, we had a policy in the DNR some time ago, and it was really difficult for me doing scientific work my entire career. It was to make everything in plain language, right? So the average person without technical training can read it, and there's no jargon in there. It's pretty straightforward. They can understand it. So I think these summaries for sub-watershed should be, no, I mean, you can have some technical detail in there for the technical people that are going to read this. That might even want to use it for something, but I think these summaries for the sub-watersheds should be really plain language.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's short notes about things, and then, of course, there's always going to be reference material where they can pursue this outside of what we provide. Which shouldn't be a problem.
And I think there's plenty of middle ground too, where, like you said, that, you know, the chloride data there is kind of provided without context, and we can add something simple to say whether that's expected based on the surrounding land use, or whether that's an aberration.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think looking at Kevin's data, I think Eagle Point Lake, for example, the chloride was relatively high, and it's not immediately obvious why it would be relative to those lakes in the northwest. So
Mhm.
that's something to note.
Okay.
Oh, and one of the things I wanted to know, I briefly mentioned it, but the only thing that would be new in these sections that wasn't included before is the sort of what can you do and summary educational information on the back page, which would be somewhat redundant between these different management plans, allowing people access to that information, even if they only look at one of these, because they may only look at the one that they are interested in, or the watershed that they live in or recreate in. So that would be, the intention is that last page would be links to existing educational information, or perhaps it's a link to Valley Branch cost share programs, like the native education program, things like that.
All of the above, yes. I think that, yeah, redundant or not, it's something that they can look at.
Things like smart, like salting best practices, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we can work on that. Okay. This is very nice, sir.
Well, I do like it.
I know everything about Eagle Point Lake now.
Only 37 to go.
Right. Oh, my goodness. I was there one time years ago to do did a study from an ornithology class on the great blue herons. And I found out they're big, scary predators. Okay. Enough of that. Very good, sir. Thank you, Greg, once again. We appreciate what you're doing for us.
Well, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, yes, sir. And if any of the gentlemen have any further comments or information, we can contact Greg by email. But this is good. Okay. Counselor, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Nice. Okay. We went over some stuff earlier. Tracy was here. And then we have the memorandum of understanding for the access. Is that a moot point or are we doing
No,
something?
so the document that you signed earlier was an easement for a permit closeout on
Okay,
an item that's not on the agenda. It's on it months ago.
Okay.
So the memorandum of understanding was on an issue brought up, well, it's been brought before the managers multiple times, I think, but just at the last meeting as well, with the property along Valley Creek. And I believe Engineer Hansen might have more of an update. But from my view, the MOU itself has been agreed upon between our office and the landowner. We're comfortable with the terms of the MOU. And then, of course, that kind of greater negotiation was the vegetation maintenance plan, the Exhibit C to the MOU. And I believe we are very close, if not to a place where we think the landowner will likely accept. And I will turn it over to Engineer Hansen to talk more about the request that the landowner was making about being able to mow once a year, have a water crossing, etc.
Yes, so I printed out paper copies of the MOU document. And then also the draft Exhibit C, which is on the 11 by 17 piece of paper. And you can see on the right, the column
oh,
there.
right, yeah.
The ones in pink that say DH, those are from David Hartwell, the landowner. JH is me, and then ST, the purple is Susan. So the original draft basically said per Valley Branch rules that the buffer vegetation should be cultivated and mowed. Anything that you do should be for benefit of the buffer and should gain approval from the watershed that's required to do any work. And then the third paragraph says that there'd be a 100-foot wide buffer measured from the water's edge on each side of the creek. And that's where the landowner has requested that there be an exception for a possible footbridge over the creek, and turning towards that kind of
Right.
working with her. Well, of course, we'd allow it just like any other project if it meets all the rules. So she added
Simple.
that phrase in there that a water crossing that meets all Valley Branch state and local regulations would be allowed. And then the next paragraph gets into the mowing issue. The landowner had a comment that you can see, I think it's maybe the third bubble, that talking about re-canary grass and therefore is desire to mow to control that re-canary grass. And so to try to address that, I originally said that mowing would be discussed during the annual meeting to figure out what needs to be done in order to maintain the buffer, because we haven't designed the project. We don't know what the vegetation is going to be in the buffer. We don't know if it's what kind of vegetation or the more grassy and flowery vegetation compared to trees, and so we really didn't know how you're gonna maintain it, since we don't know what the buffer is.
Buckthorn.
Yeah, so he wants to, so I put in there that, you know, mowing would be discussed as one of the options. I mean, he came back and said he didn't really like that because of what that means that it'll be discussed and then poo-pooed by the watershed district and basically. So I had a conversation with Fred Rosamowski from Bar this afternoon. He's a ecologist. So, and Aaron Wool of our office, so a wetland scientist, and Mark, who I think you met, who's going to be managing the project. And Fred said that, you know, once a year mowing wouldn't be so bad if it's done in the dormant season. They really won't do much with Three Canary grass. You could, in order to deal with Three Canary grass, you could mow more in the growing season. If you keep on mowing in the growing season, it might get rust out and it might die. This is a challenge. In the ideal, so I asked Fred, it's like, okay, forget about the landowner's request to mow. Based on what you know a little bit about the project, we'd be excavating out the banks that might remove some of that seed, invasive seed mix, and maybe there's some natives that might pop up because that might be lower ground. But based on what you know of the project, what would be the ideal management plan? And he said that, well, mowing in November or April or May would probably be okay, and then spot spraying during the season, like 3 times a year, going through there in June, July, and August, and
Spot spraying.
the invasives to control them.
Okay.
And I asked about burning, and he said, well, floodplain, the vegetation probably isn't. It's probably not a good idea to do burning because it's. Can't remember the terminology I use, but it probably would be a benefit to the buffer. So based on that, I think I have it someplace.
Lauren, can you see all that?
I sure can.
Excellent.
I don't like seeing more of me than I need to, so I like this screen better.
Okay.
So I added what's in your handout, that the landowner added a single mowing event will be allowed to manage the buffer for controlling invasive species or protecting, enhancing the restoration of the area. And so I added the phrase, a single mowing event during the dormant season. Kind of put some boundaries around it.
And when is the dormant season?
Dormant season would be November, kind of the shoulder season,
okay.
I think about November or April.
Okay.
And then Karen Wold of our office mentioned that she had looked at the area in the Natural Heritage Database when Valley Branch was submitting a grant for rare and threatened species.
Yeah.
And said that, you know, there's a possibility that there are some on the site. And so if there are, you would not want to mow, want to
Yeah.
do something to protect that. So then I added another phrase that is if identified on the site, because we don't know if they're actually on the site, because some of these surveys were done in the 70s, and if they've been mowing weekly since the 70s, it might not exist anymore. But if they're identified on the site, that special consideration should be done to protect.
And who's responsible for all this scrutiny?
Well, the last 2 paragraphs would say, because it's a grant,
Yeah.
the project needs to be in place for 25 years. And it won't be constructed this year, likely to be constructed next year. This year's the design phase of it. So it starts in 2025 and it needs to be in place until 2050. And so the last 2 paragraphs say, for the first 3 years that we'll meet and we'll come up with a detailed maintenance plan. And then after those 3 years, we'll still meet, but it won't be quite as detailed of a.
Okay.
John, in light of the additions you made, would it be best to delete the last sentence of the entire thing. A single mowing event will be considered in determining how to best manage the buffer for controlling invasive species.
Well, the landowner didn't touch that paragraph of the, draft. And so I didn't touch it either, because the way it says is that it'll be considered, it doesn't necessarily get permission. But within that first 3-year term of the projects, that's where the
Oh, I
landowner
see. Mm-hmm.
submitted, and so that's where I added the phrase after consultation with Federal Zamowski to change it to during the dormant season.
This is very picky. So you can tell me if I'm being over the top here, but a single mowing event during the dormant season, if it's split, if there's really 2 times in a calendar year that qualifies as dormant season, should it be limited to once per year? Because otherwise he could mow in April and again in November. Is that right?
Okay, so, Lauren, would you suggest a single mowing event per year during the dormant season?
Yes.
Can I throw a monkey wrench in there?
Yeah, by all means.
So again, depending on the vegetation plan that's put in place, to get native plants established, there typically is required mowing for at least the first 3 years, early season, to control the weeds and invasives. So perhaps it's like that plan has to be put together, and then this is maybe after establishment of the natives, because it's pretty typical that there is mowing done around, to give the native species a chance to get ahead of the other grasses. So
Yeah, this doesn't say that you can't do, if all parties agree to more mowing, you could do that, but this, because of the landowner pretty much demanding that
Yeah.
there be at least one mowing event. That's why this discussion, we wanted to keep it a little bit vague until we knew what
Sure.
the plan is, but he wanted more detail.
And really, once that vegetation plan's put together, then there's a maintenance plan on how you establish it, because you do have to spot spray and do other things until it gets established. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'd expect it.
I think it does. I might have a.
Right.
I'm sorry, John. My suggestion would be to reword it a little bit to say you'll meet to review the needed maintenance. The plan will include at least one mowing event per year during the dormant season. To make that really clear that it could include more, but to ensure for the landowner that it will always include at least one during that dormant season.
I don't know if we want that though. We might want to go more with spot spraying.
Depends on the species, right? Depends on the species. You don't want to cut it. You might not want to cut everything.
Optional? Can we throw in a word optional or as needed?
But isn't that the sticking point?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
he
he does-
doesn't want it to be optional, he wants it to be guaranteed that he can mow at least once.
Then what are we gonna do? Go out and see just what he mowed, or, I mean, I don't know if he's gonna do it or who's gonna do it for the next 25 years? Is this something we monitor?
It's something that we're required monitored with the grant.
Okay.
And the MOU is to give Valley Branch access to the
Yeah.
area for purposes of the project and ongoing maintenance.
And with the excavation of all that material, there's a really good chance that there's, certainly the dormant native seeds there. There's like probably a seed bank. There's a really good chance there's a
Yeah.
native seed bank which will come up on its own,
And there can't be an
which is
addition,
great. It's perfect.
there can't be an addition of native seeds to add to the,
That would be the plan to.
yeah,
To
right?
come up with.
Yeah.
You know, both, flowery grasses as well as trees, because we want shade.
Yeah, that sounds simple enough. Not buckthorn. Yeah,
So I guess Lauren and I can continue working on this exhibit C.
please.
And work with the landowner, but just wanted to bring it to manager's attention and gauge the board on. They had strong opinions on managing a buffer that has not yet been defined what that.
Yeah, that's, yeah. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how we deal with it outside of what we would typically do, you know, and I don't know if he's asking for something that's very, very specific, or to give him leeway to sort of do what he wants.
In my opinion, the
Yeah.
manager saw what the property looked like.
Yeah.
and Saw that, you know, upstream of where this project is, it's managed as a park. And so he mows pretty close to the top of bank. And that's really not the best management
Right,
for a trout stream. You want deep-rooted vegetation. You want vegetation that provides habitat for the trout, and you
Right.
want shade. So allowing him to mow it and make it Kentucky bluegrass,
no,
grass, I think that would not be beneficial to the trout stream.
so what are we going to do now? We're gonna hash that out with him again?
So as I said, I wanted to get a gauge from the managers, and it seems like the managers are okay with infrequent mowing, but to allow some mowing. And so legal counsel and I can continue to work with the landowner to see if we can satisfy him, but yet protect the creek.
Yeah,
Hope I
that's,
get this,
I hope that's not such a difficult thing, because again, my concern is that he may decide to, you know, make that look like a golf lawn or something, whatever. So,
But I think this is important, so I mean,
yeah,
I think the managers could say, well, if you don't agree with this, then I guess we're just not gonna do the project.
I don't want to dig my heels in like that. We want to make this,
I think that when you want to mow it weekly, I think you should dig in.
And I thought we had a discussion with them when we were in the field that this lower reach below the park that I believe his mother wanted would be managed differently for native vegetation.
That's the impression.
yeah. Okay, then, dig in our heels and see how this comes out, or if there's more negotiation involved.
The DNR has told me that they will not permit this if there isn't native deep rooted vegetation in the public.
Right. Simple enough.
I think I have what I need from the board. Lauren, do you? Any
Yeah, I think
questions?
so.
What do you think, Lauren? Are we good on this? We're gonna. take it
Yeah, I
back-
think so. I think John and I will put our heads together, and I think we're close. I think the understanding between the parties is pretty close. It's putting it into language that satisfies everybody and of course meets the district's needs. I think we'll get there.
Okay. Okay with, all you gentlemen? Right. So let's follow up on that if we could, sir. Okay, we don't need to sign anything today.
So, managers, I did hand out,
Yeah.
I think I handed out a copy of agreements with Washington Conservation District.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I wasn't, I didn't get this to Lauren until late this afternoon, so I don't know if Lauren said you need to review this. It's the standard agreement that the managers
Yeah.
have signed for the last several years with the conservation districts, but if you're uncomfortable signing it, and forgive me, Lauren, for not being able to get it to you sooner.
What do you think, Lauren?
That's,
Have you had a-
that's okay. I haven't had a chance to look at it. John, have you compared it with previous years at all, or have you not had that chance either?
Well, Kevin's reviewed it to make sure it captures the water bodies and the frequency that the managers have approved, but I haven't reviewed the actual agreement. To make sure
Okay,
that,
then it would, yeah, it would probably be my preference that it wait till next meeting so that we have a chance to view it.
You don't need to do anything beyond that. Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you for that. That's interesting. Keep us abreast of that development. And I guess the sooner the better with that gentleman, right? Okay. Mr. Inspector,
Will do.
thank you, Counselor.
President Rashawn, managers, I did include a report in the packet.
Good.
I do have some updates, but were there any questions from the report? Any of the items from the report?
My comment is that I get the impression that everybody seems to be in compliance or they're following through. Some of these for sure that they were able to assess and repair in a short period of time. And we're anticipating more rain, I think. And so,
as an update to some of those basins I was
Yeah.
checking, because we're moving towards permit closure on some of those.
mhm,
The I-94 logistics, that's in Woodbury on Hudson Road. The western infiltration basin performs really well. The one on the east side does not. They were in, Engineer Hansen has reviewed the as-built and found that there were some elevation issues that they'll have to do some corrections on that east side. And they'll probably need to go in and work up that soil in there to see if it'll work better, but that one doesn't meet our current requirements. But the other ones, the Kokora volleyball, the Amazon site's working well. The city hall infiltration basin works, although they have a lot of stabilization to do in that area. But so yeah, we're seeing some things that are working well.
yeah,
I did have an issue at the Springs of Lake Elmo where I did go in for a inspection for the closeout. If you remember, they have the underground stormwater system that they're supposed to use for irrigation. We're also having some erosion down to the east side on their large retaining wall into the Tesla site. And so I was able to, after the last rain, I think I finally figured out their issue, and it has to do with the elevation of their catch basin and broken curb and, you know, a series of things that's letting the water kind of bypass. Not all the water's getting into the catch basin, it's bypassing it and going down the retaining wall, the inside of the wall.
right. That,
And so
yeah, what's going on?
they're going to watch that more closely. There's not anything wrong with the wall. There's nothing happening to the wall, but it's coming down one particular area and continuing to erode. And at the expense of the neighbor who has to keep repairing it.
Okay,
But that's water that's supposed to be captured and reused in the irrigation system. So they had a few things there. I also discovered that they had removed fencing, which fencing isn't something that we care about. What caught my eye is they removed the fencing in the wetland buffer where they're replacing snow from snow removal.
Okay.
And so I guess that's a big question I have. Is that an allowable thing to use that wetland buffer as a place for them to dump their snow? And
French rules prohibit that.
yeah, so I confirmed with the manager of the site that they said they had approval to do that, but I'm not sure approval from who. I said, well, with the watershed, and I don't know anything about it, but that shouldn't be done. So that's a big one on the checklist to close out the permit. They've got to stop that. they don't have good places on site to put the snow, but they designed the site. This is Minnesota.
Yeah.
Figured out.
Welcome.
So we have that issue down by the retaining wall. There were some signs that they had to replace for our buffer zone. And then, they had this issue by this whole complex is designed for ADA compliance. So that the entries into each house is at grade. There's hardly any really, there's just some curb, and every little walkway intersection is very flat. And yet they have water pooling near this trash area that they needed a catch basin at, and they added a catch basin. But in order for the water to get to it, it has to kind of come up over the sidewalk and kind of make its way over, so the water doesn't all get there in the pools. I know we're not responsible for ADA compliance, but pooling water in a climate where it freezes seems to be
Right.
counterproductive to ADA just by, you
I
know.
knew where that was going.
Yeah, so more salts, I don't know.
Is that a banana peel?
Anyway, I pointed it out because it just is, I don't think they fully, they're not fully complying, or I don't think
Well,
I think they're just kind of coming short of really making it work.
okay, how can we, you have any suggestions or proposals for,
But,
trying to make them more compliant?
well, I think we'll be talking with their staff on compliance, because they still have to show that they use the irrigation system, and they have to document that, how much they've used. And so that's
Do they,
something that we'll have to have before we can close out the permit.
they have a big surety, right?
They do.
Yeah, sure. I don't remember how large it is.
No, I get it, yeah.
And the follow-up to that, Springs of Willowbrook, so their sister complex in Oakdale. I was out there today actually to go confirm that they actually did install the pump for the irrigation system. It's been installed but not tested because they don't have enough water in their system to test it. So once we get that, I guess then they'll have to submit the same thing. What's their maintenance routine? Are they using it? Show us or use it. Because last year they used city water for irrigation. But they didn't have the pump installed yet, so. But, so I guess John and I will have to watch that closely to make sure they're in compliance, because that's their volume control, is having those reuse systems in place. So that's one we're gonna have to really watch.
The, just a quick question, the previous one you talked about, not Tesla, but the one associated with Tesla?
The springs of Lake Elmo. It's
Yeah,
right to the
they,
west of it.
Those are, underground storage, right?
Yes.
For the, are there pumps installed now, or is that still not, or is it gravity? I don't recall. I thought they were a little higher.
I don't know where their pump system is. I didn't see their pump system, so I think I need to verify they actually have a pump. They said they had one. I mean, I know where the tanks are placed in the site. So that there's certainly some due diligence to be done on both those sites to make sure that they're complying with the permit that you issued, so.
Yep, on them, Mr. Brower. Awesome. Okay.
Drove through the Sunnybrook area here recently. I know John did as well today, and it's very dry, no issues out that way. I stopped by the Silver Lake outlet earlier this week, and it's dry. There's nothing moving through
I
there.
take it we haven't had conversations.
Well, it's building up. It's building up a little bit, so it'll take a while for it to flow.
And we haven't had conversations with anybody that we want to, whose properties we want to acquire. So that's all very quiet.
This afternoon, I did have a conversation
Oh, you
with
did?
one of the lower homes on the property. Very friendly conversation.
Okay.
On the price. I think that the sticking point is, since the individual has lived in the house, I think he built the house back in 1968, he doesn't want it to just be removed. so. But toward the end of the conversation, he was explaining where the septic system is and that they've never used chemicals and these other things as information for me to know when Valley Ranch should purchase the property. I think. So,
Eventually it's gonna happen. Let's hope there's no flooding event to precipitate that sooner than we like.
it's, all the basins are very dry.
Yeah. Right, and then, Mr. I forgot the gentleman's name.
Sunbird.
Yes, Mr. Sunbird. So he's sitting high and pretty, access and everything, no problems there. Good. Good. Okay. Okay. Mr. Brower, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Yeah, keep us posted on that, situation. You know which one. I'm glad you know which one.
Well, there's two of them.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're related.
Yes,
And it's
sir.
the same company, it's the same developer, it's the same property.
Yeah. Okay. Managers, anything the managers have? Rick, the check?
Yeah, we're making progress on shifting our checking account. We have the first check right here.
Yay.
And it's to our engineering for $100. As part of their payment next meeting.
$1 million payment?
Yeah, right.
When the accountant sees that, they'll say, hey, we're a little short.
Yeah.
So this will give us a test of how the checks go into 4M and get then paid for out of the 4M account in the US Bank account. With that, we'll, assuming everything goes fine, that goes through all that, then we'll just do the next set of checks, which would be our next meeting, all on the US Bank. So that ought to work out.
Excellent. We're gonna find out. Okay. We've got some stuff planned on my end. I'm gonna be meeting with John and we're gonna again set up the meeting to have a chloride workshop. And I think we're gonna have another workshop with Greg. We'd certainly like to invite you for that one to follow up on further information that I think might take longer than what we typically do here. So lot of information, a lot of stuff to deal with. So that's all I have at this point. Do any of the managers have any other items?
Water consortium next week, is, on climate change again, so
Okay,
I'll try to tune in for that one.
from your 44 pounds. Okay. Love it. Mr. Brock, how's your main street there? Holy fuck.
Yeah. I may be, well, I haven't got verification, but I may be, on the agenda at our, township meeting.
Uh-oh.
We, not watershed
Yeah,
related,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm just on a mission to try to maintain the speed limit 50 miles an hour after construction.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
that I actually visited with Bill Moosebrugger after our meeting last
They're-
time.
They're not thinking of raising it, are they?
Oh, I will go up
50
Really?
Most
50 miles an hour in Oak Green right now?
50. Yeah. It's,
Do a hell of a number. I'm glad I was in my truck tonight coming up there.
well, the
You know, that's-
Oh, you mean, yeah, right.
yeah, the detour speed limit's 35 right
Yeah.
now, but
And it's on the
I was
shoulder.
gonna say, wow.
You're on the shoulder. It's pretty bad.
no,
Oh,
it's
my goodness.
really ridiculous. They're county's going to do a speed study where they just measure how fast everybody goes, and it's kind of basically it's the average speed that they're driving. That's going to be the new speed limit.
So
You know, they take out the hills, slow this down. I mean, they already go 60.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely.
of driveways.
So anyway, I'm trying to get the township to request the county not to not do that study.
You can always put a big huge sound barrier up in front of your house.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that information. And now, will everybody be able to attend the May 9th and May 23 meetings?
May-
Will all be here?
May 23, I'm gonna be approximately 900 miles north in
Michigan?
east, west central Manitoba,
Oh,
pursuing
Manitoba.
fish that are large of body and naive of mind in regarding to the baits I'm gonna be throwing at them. I'm in the process of determining if the lodge has decent internet and if I can connect virtually. And when I make that determination, I'll let you and John know.
That-
around Thompson?
Well, Cusco?
In Manitoba.
Yeah, Snow Lake area,
Oh,
north of the big lakes, yeah.
What are you going for, giant muskies or what?
No, walleye, northern pike and lake.
Oh, you're gonna call us during a fish fry.
Many 40-pound northern pike.
Yeah.
Common,
Whoa. That's fun.
and an occasional 30-pound walleye. 30-inch walleye.
30-inch.
They're
Radioactive ones.
Well, I love to catch 130, so.
But you got it right, the 30-inch are still good, okay. Let's see, we have that squared away and one final item. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded.
I,
All right.
Aye,
Aye.
we are adjourned. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for joining us.